add my welcome to those of you here with us in person and to those online. My name is Ruth Stanton. I'm delighted to be your worship associate this beautiful spring morning. For our chalice lighting today, we have There Was a Miracle from Adrienne Marie Brown, and our chalice lighters are Miles and Carl McLean. If the goal was to increase the love rather than winning or dominating a constant opponent, I think we could actually imagine liberation from constant oppression. We would suddenly be seeing everything we do, everyone we meet, not through the tactical eyes of war, but through the eyes of love. We would see that everywhere there is complex, ancient, fertile ground full of potential. I think that it is healing behavior to look at something so broken and see the possibility and wholeness in it. In a fractal conception, I am a cell-sized unit of the human organism, and I have to use my life to leverage a shift in the system by how I am, as much as with the things I do. This means actually being in my life, and it means bringing my values into my daily decision-making. Each day should be lived with purpose. I touch my own skin, and it tells me that before there was any harm, there was a miracle. As Fred noticed today, we've had some changes to our music, and at the last moment, Taffy Brooks stepped in to help us out on this Easter morning, so we are very grateful. Before we move in, I have a little bit of music/hymn book etiquette. Many of you in the pews or in the chairs have noticed a moment of puzzlement sometimes when looking for a hymn book. There may not be any in front of you in easy reach, and no doubt by sharing in the past you've been able to participate anyway in the songs and readings. But to make it easier to find the hymn books, we would recommend putting hymn books back underneath the seat in front of you so that they'll be in view. Resist putting them underneath you on the seat you're sitting on. That is hard for the next person to figure out. The hymn books placed there seem to disappear into oblivion. So think in front and in view. Of course, this doesn't really apply to folks sitting along the wall or if you're in the front row, because there aren't any seats in front of you. But thank you for your thoughtfulness in going forward. And Taffy, do we have a hymn we're singing together now?
326.
Hymn number 326 in our gray hymnal.
Music and its poetry surround and bless us through the days. For this we sing in harmony, together giving thanks and praise.
Our congregation has long had the tradition of the Rippling Bowl, and in just a few minutes I'll invite you to come forward if you wish to place a stone or a shell in our beautiful bowl of water. The bowl represents our community together, and the stones and shells our joys and concerns. As we thoughtfully place the stones and shells in the bowl, ripples of energy are created, much like our gathering, and the sharing of our lives creates energy for each other and our wider community. I will place a stone and a shell in the bowl for those of you joining us virtually, and you may now come forward. That was lovely, thank you. Our denomination doesn't have a creed that we all have to believe in order to belong, which is good because we come from many backgrounds and have differing beliefs. But we are an intentional community, and a number of years ago, we wrote a covenant to express how we would like to be with each other and with the world around us. Please join me in saying our covenant together. With courage we say, we are a people of faith and hope. Together we covenant to strive to become our better selves, to honor both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief. And now we come to the part of our service where we have the opportunity to greet each other. On this beautiful Easter morning, do reach out to each other while being sensitive to how the person you're greeting would like to be greeted. High fives, hugs, bows, and more are all possibilities. It is fine to remain seated if you prefer. And please do return to your seats because we've got lots more good stuff when you hear Taffy play the piano again.
We have a special story coming up, and she needs her mic.
It's okay. Good morning again. Time for all ages. So some of you may think that time for all ages just means all age children, but it doesn't. There's tremendous wisdom that can be gained from children's stories. And so time for all ages is truly for everybody. I think if we all read more children's stories, the whole world would be a better place. So with that in mind, I invite children, youth, adults, anybody who wants to come forward, and if you choose not to come forward, that's fine too. Just sit back and relax and enjoy the story. So if anyone would like to come forward, you can just gather in a circle here. I'll wait for just a minute. You can see the pictures better too. Good morning. Great. So today's story is called Chicken Sunday by Patricia Polacco. The story is about a little girl named Alina, who is from the Ukraine. She was born there, but she lives now in the United States with her family. And next door to her are her two best friends, Winston and Stuart. And Winston and Stuart live with their grandma. They call her Grandma Eula. And Grandma Eula is really Alina's grandma too. She loves her just as much as Stuart and Winston, because her babushka, her grandma, died a couple years ago, and so she's very close to Grandma Eula. On Sundays, all of them walk to church together. And it's not that Alina has the same religious beliefs as her friends, but she goes because she loves to be with them, and they all love to be together. On the way to church, they pass a lot of the shops downtown, and there's one shop in particular, Mr. Kudinsky's hat shop. And Grandma Eula will always stop at that window and look and say, "Oh, they're such pretty hats. I'd love those hats. I'd love to have a hat." And she just sighs and she goes on. Well, there's something else special that happens on Sundays after church. They all go back to Grandma Eula and Winston and Stuart's house, and they have a big lunch together that Grandma cooks. And it's always fried chicken, some sort of vegetable, spoon bread, corn on the cob, and always some kind of special dessert. And they've gotten to the point where they call it Chicken Sundays because it's that special to them to gather together. Well, one day after church, when they were finished with lunch, Grandma Eula said, "You know, on the way to church today, I saw an especially pretty hat, and I would love to have that hat." Well, Alina, Winston, and Stuart looked at each other and said, So after lunch, they went out in the backyard, and they said, "We have got to get Grandma Eula that hat." So they had a little hiding place where they kept a little tin can, and they put all their loose change in there from odd jobs or just different things that they would do. It's kind of their little bank. And they took out all the coins, and they counted it, and they said, "Oh, gosh, we don't have near enough to buy that hat for Grandma Eula." And they said, "Well, what can we do?" And they said, "Well, maybe we can go ask Mr. Kudinsky at his shop if we could do some odd jobs and maybe earn the money to buy that hat." So the next day, after school, the three of them went down to Mr. Kudinsky's shop. And they were a little bit afraid to go see Mr. Kudinsky because he didn't have any children of his own. And he wasn't mean, but he just wasn't always really friendly. He was a little bit gruff, and so they were afraid. But they wanted to do it for Grandma Eula. And so as they were coming up to the shop, though, they noticed something bad happening. There were some older boys that were standing there, and they were throwing rotten eggs at Mr. Kudinsky's shop. And they didn't know why, and then the boys ran off. Well, Mr. Kudinsky came out to see what was going on, and he didn't see those boys. He saw Winston, Stuart, and Alina standing there, and he thought they had done that. And he was very upset and said, "Well, I'm going to call your grandma. You're in big trouble." And they didn't know what to do, but they went home. And of course, he had already called Grandma Eula, and they were in a lot of trouble. And she was mostly just disappointed. She said, you know, I thought you kids were better than that. I thought you were good people. And that I'm just really surprised you would do something like that. Well, they all just stood there because they couldn't really say anything or it would spoil their surprise. So by standing there and not saying anything, it kind of made them look guilty. And so Grandma Eula said, you're going to need to figure out a way to show Mr. Kudinski that you're good people and you really didn't mean to do any harm to his shop. Well, the next night, they would switch back and forth where they had meals together. So the next night, they were all over at Alina's house for dinner. And they were trying to figure out what to do because they knew they were in trouble and they couldn't figure out how to fix it, but they also wanted to get Grandma that hat. So they were sitting around after dinner, and all of a sudden, Alina said, eggs, eggs, I know, eggs. And Winston and Stuart looked at her and said, are you crazy? Eggs is what got us in trouble in the first place. She said, no, a different kind of egg. So she ran and she got a boiled egg out of the refrigerator and a little small tool and some beeswax and a candle and some egg dye. She said, no, listen, this is what we're going to do. So Alina's mom showed the three of them how to do some decorations on the egg. So what they would do is they would draw with the wax on the eggshell, and then they would dip it in some dye, and then they would draw some more with wax and dip it in. And then at the end, they would melt the wax away. If those of you who are artists know this is a wax resist technique. So they would melt the wax away, and then all the beautiful colors and designs would show through. And Alina's mom said, these are called pisanka eggs, and this is what we did back in Ukraine for Easter. So the next day, so they worked all night, not all night, but they worked till pretty late at night and created a whole basket full of eggs, pisanka eggs. So the next day, they went to Mr. Kudinski's shop. And they walked in and they said, we have some eggs and we thought you might let us sell them here. And they said it very timidly because they were still a little bit afraid. And he said, pisanka eggs, I haven't seen them since I was a little boy in Ukraine. And he was so excited. And he said, of course you can sell them. And I also need to tell you that all of you have a lot of chutzpah to be here. Now, chutzpah is a word that just means you're very brave to come and do this and come and greet me and tell me this. So he said, tell you what, let's plan what we're going to do, and we'll go have some tea and cake together, which is what they did. They went in the back room and they had tea and cake, and Mr. Kudinski told them all about his life as a boy in Ukraine. So they were very excited to get to know him a little bit better. So the next day, they went back to Mr. Kudinski's shop, and all of the eggs were for sale. And they sold every single egg very quickly, and everybody was just stunned by how beautiful they were. And if you all have ever seen any pisanka eggs, they're quite beautiful, very elaborate designs. So after the store closed, they counted up their money, and they realized they had way more than enough to buy that hat for Grandma Eula. So they ran to tell Mr. Kudinski. And when they did, he was coming out of the back with a big hat box with a bow on it. And he said, I've seen Grandma Eula looking at this hat, and I want her to have it. And he said, I'm not going to take your money, but I want you to tell your grandma how proud I am of you and what good people you are. So the next day, which was Easter Sunday, they were about to burst. They were so excited with their surprise, and they gave the hat to Grandma Eula. And she was crying when she opened the box. And then they told her what had really happened and why they couldn't tell her anything that day when they were in trouble. And she gave them all a big hug. So they went to church that day, and Grandma wore her fancy hat that she'd been wanting. And then after that, they all went back to Grandma Eula's house and had the best chicken sundae ever. So everyone can go back to your seats, and I will see children in the RE foyer after the service for our Easter egg hunt.
The mission of our church is supported by the treasure, time, and talents of our members and friends of this congregation. We offer many ways for you to share your financial contributions, including passing our offering plate. Even if you've already contributed your treasure in another way, please add your blessing as the plate is passed. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. We also wish to share blessings with the world outside of our congregation. So each month we share the plate with a cause or an organization that is serving the world around us. Half of all loose cash and all designated Share the Plate gifts are given to that organization. And this month our Share the Plate organization is the International Convocation of Unitarian Universalist Women. Our offering will now be gratefully received.
One of the tasks of a minister is to offer expansive interpretation, to challenge us to stretch the limits of our interpretation of the world and our life in it, to pull that into greater capacity. Fred began the service by saying that the music the trio was about to play had nothing to do with Easter. And I want to emphatically stretch that interpretation. Have you ever heard such music that so embodied the movement of the blooming redbuds and the dogwoods in blossom on this very morning? Wasn't it so beautiful? And anyway, any song that's meant to accompany a dance where the male dancer is doing something with a stick and a bowler hat to show off certainly has a lot to do with fecundity and the promise of spring. It has everything to do with Easter. A year ago, one of that trio, I won't say which one he was, one of that trio traveled states away to a week-long camp on Swedish folk music to learn this type of fiddling. And did you hear that it required learning the use of an entirely new instrument with 5 extra hidden sets of strings? If you've ever played the guitar and then tried to play a 12-string guitar, you know what it does to your hands. Learning a whole new instrument to offer just a few minutes of song to us. And I have it on good authority that whichever member of the trio this was, and I won't say his name, that between last summer and now, to offer us this music, he sat down with that tune and transcribed by hand into the idiom of these players the music to be played. What ridiculousness! What nonsense! What is that love? To pour that much time and anxiety and energy to offer us that embodiment of the fervor and beauty, the fertility of spring. And speaking of men with hats, when I showed up this morning, I saw 2 bunnies roving around the lawn. One with the most beautiful, curling, long silver locks trailing behind her, quite like Alice about to fall into Wonderland, and the other exactly like the White Rabbit, hat and all, stopwatch tucked into his antique jacket, I am sure. 2 people seeding the lawn with Easter eggs for a hunt to happen on the first day of spring break with no promise that any children would even show up because they are traveling. What nonsense. Alice and her rabbit. To go out and prepare the field for that rite of spring with no guarantee that there would even be anybody here to celebrate with them. What is that love? And this week, a woman pierced by grief, the loss of her beloved, one by one, began to share the longings of that person gone. Out of grief, sharing with love to generate new life, to help other people find a way in this world of heartbreak and sorrow. What nonsense to take our grief and through love to turn it into life. Well, this month we've talked about how are we going to do the things that we have envisioned for ourselves as a congregation? How will we reach into the future and accomplish the impossible task that we have set for ourselves? We've talked about mindsets and postures and strategies, but this is the heart of it. This love that makes no sense, that would pour itself out to create life far beyond ourselves, to make this a world of thriving for all beings. Join me in silence. And as you go into silence, touch in yourself that love for a child, for a partner, for a cause, for an electorate, for a community, for the living world, wherever your love locates. Love that would pour itself out in nonsense. Touch that in you now. A love that goes so to the heart. It stirs both grief and joy. To the point of overwhelming us. Touch that love in you. How much you would risk for that love. Love is the capacity to do what is impossible, to bring into being what all the logic of the world says cannot be. What is Easter? Easter is the choice of love to turn and look directly in the face of all we fear most. Empires of greed and violence, of ideology, empires even of death. To say, not, I will beat you, but let me show you a more excellent way.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, born in the wind. Rise and thou sing, move staff in the hand, giving life the strength of justice. Roots hold me close, winds set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
To extinguish our chalice from Brene Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection. May we experience the strength of connection, the love of belonging, and the grace of pure joy.
Together,
What motivates a pianist to respond on Saturday night to the call, to risk being heard on YouTube for eternity, to lead us all in this service? What kind of love is that? Can we give Taffy Rook a big round of applause? And what leads a congregation to find its way through songs, different tempos than they're used to, different places in the service than they expect, at the risk of sounding like nonsense on YouTube for eternity? What kind of love is that? What is the love that you would risk? The nonsense to show the world a more excellent way. I think everybody's invited to the Easter egg hunt.